The Final Texas Debate was held between Wendy-Davis, the firebrand out of Fort Worth, Bob Schaefer's hometown, and the Attorney General, Wheelchair-Abbott. He is the Republican running to succeed Texas Perry and his rock. Now, this is a very interesting development there. Wheelchair actually shot a commercial where he's in his wheelchair running down a Texas highway. So you can kind of see the backdrop of what is happening in Texas. Also, you'll hear in this, well, no you won't, but anyway, the governor, Texas Perry, announced that, and Wheelchair-Abbott actually in the debate talks about the Ebola virus and how Texas was on top of it. Now we find out that Texas was not on top of it, that the individual, Mr. Duncan, had arrived at a hospital on Friday complaining of various symptoms and was given antibiotics and sent home. He reappeared 2 days later by ambulance and medical transport, and he is now in quarantine. The medical vehicle itself is in quarantine. Everything's in quarantine. Also, some school children were exposed to it. So Texas was not on top of it. Where it goes from here, who actually knows? But you would assume that if an individual came into an ER, as he did, and complained of symptoms and told the people that he just returned from Liberia, and hopefully he also told the people where it was, and they would assume that perhaps he could be an Ebola person, and he was exposed evidently to it around some patients. One thing you have to understand is in this area, in these various countries, there is a lot of suspicion, and it is not confined of the medical authorities and the government. Now, that's not confined to Liberia and some of the other states in East Africa. That also occurs here in the U.S. There is a number of of people out there that do not believe in vaccinating their children. Now, these are not the traditional ones. These are right-wing fanatics, but nonetheless distrust of government in general, and they are part of the party of Pat Buchanan. Now, these people and their distrust, etc., does create problems. And this debate, Wendy-Davis talks about funding of education in Texas. Wheelchair-Abbott is in court trying to overturn a lawsuit in the Texas Supreme Court. So he's not a funder of education there. In fact, he wants to, according to Wheelchair, test 4-year-olds to get into kindergarten. Well, that is just went to an extreme. That is part of his right-wing regime, and at the same time, he's opposed to minimum wage. He pays his female employees less than his male, as is in the Texas Attorney General's office. So it was a very lively debate. He also was accused by Wendy-Davis, and the documents back that up, of running a slush fund in what's called the Texas Empowerment Office, that he's in charge of as Texas Perry was flaunting that while he was running to California to try to recruit people. The problem Texas Perry has is he's 47th in education in the U.S. as the state of Texas. We don't know about the rock. I guess Texas Perry just sets on it. But when you are there, and at the same time Wheelchair-Abbott is talking about making Texas #1 in his preschool operation, and at the same time he's saying, well, we put money here, we put money there, but the actual facts is that on the regime of Texas Perry, they've cut education in Texas. The Chamber of Commerce there is worried about this situation. Hundreds of teachers have been laid off in Texas. And at the same time, you have this right-wing school board that's effectively been virtually, in a virtual sense, burning books. So you have all these things going on in Texas at the same time. So it's a very unfortunate situation. It's not a very good environment there. in Texas, and Wendy Davis, in our opinion, we support her incidentally, it would be a welcome addition to Texas. Now, a new poll is out. We'll get into it, and we have a debate will come after us. But nonetheless, this new poll, and we'll go more into that. The Lusum poll found that Wheelchair-Abbott holds a 9-point lead, 49 to 40. But it's also pointed out that Wheelchair-Abbott has close to $40 million in his fund. Let's see what has happened there. He has raised $7.8 million, and well, he has more than that. He has $35.6 million on hand. So if my calculations serve me correctly, there he has about $42 million so there. Let's see. Announced that his campaign has $30 million on hand. The final push to raise $7.8 million. We'll call it $8 million there. Since July, Abbott has $35.6 million on hand. Davis has $8.8 million. But you have to understand that if she had $10 million, she'd be still 3-1 there for Wheelchair-Abbott. Now, this poll, this is a Texas Lusum poll, was conducted the 11th through 25th of September. Now, this was before the news reports of a damning independent audit of job creation. This is Texas Enterprise Fund that gave away millions of taxpayer dollars with lax oversight. None. In fact, they found that Wheelchair had literally given money to people that didn't even apply. So this thing sort of goes round and round. Now, in the lieutenant governor's race, this is Dan Patrick, leads Vanderput of San Antonio by 14 points. So let's get to the Lusum poll. We have it here, and we've been looking at it. Sometimes what happens is we don't really have time to get into it. It's an annual independent poll reveals Texans' diverse attitudes on key issues: immigration, abortion, the Affordable Care Act. This was released on the 30th of the last day of September. Margaret Justice is the person, and she can be reached at 281-250-8253. Again, that's 281-250-2853. Texans see integration and border security as the most important issue facing the state. Combined total of 31% push education to the third place this year, while the economy and jobs are seen as the most important facing the country. Combined total of 20. On immigration, the majority of Texas adults believe unaccompanied children from Central America. Remember, Texas Perry sent the state police and National Guard there to guard the border, but yet hasn't paid for it. And at the same time, they were literally on their way to food banks. Who illegally crossed the border this past summer should be sent home as soon as possible, but the majority of Hispanics and Democrats feel they have a right to stay. On abortion, and this is a divide in Texas between the new Texas, the old Texas, and the people that Wheelchair-Abbott and Texas Perry rely upon, rural, older white Texans. On abortion, Texans overwhelmingly believe abortion should be legal in case of rape, incest, to protect the life of a mother. Wheelchair-Abbott gives the excuse that he's a Catholic and he doesn't see that as necessary. 68% for each respective with regard to birth defects. Abortion support decreases, but a majority still favor legal abortions in this circumstance. The Affordable Care Act remains unpopular with Texans despite more than 7 million Americans having signed up for private insurance under the law, and that's a very important situation. Private insurance. Texans view themselves as healthy, 86%, and oppose tax, 68% on full calorie sugary soft drinks to encourage better health. An independent statewide poll solution, a non-partisan, non-profit statewide leadership group suggests Texans are evenly split when it comes to, well, we went over that. Let's just get into the poll here, hopefully. Are you registered to vote? This is in the poll, 83%, 17% were not. Generally speaking, would you say that you're extremely interested in politics and public affairs? Somewhat interested, not very interested, not interested at all. Extremely interested, 29%. That's a high percentage. Somewhat interested, 47%. Not very interested at all, 11%. Not at all interested, 11%. That's roughly 22% there. Many times people intend to vote but do not end up doing so because of events, personal circumstances, etc. What do you think is the most important issue facing the country today? The number one was 15% here, the economy, national security, terrorism, 8%, immigration, 8%, the war, 7%, political corruption, leadership, 6%, Mideast unrest, 6%, healthcare, 5%, unemployment and jobs, 5%, national debt, 3%, border security, 3%, social welfare programs, 3%, moral decline, 2%, gay marriage, you can see why they're not pushing that one, 1%, polarization, gridlock, and partisanship there. What do you think is the most important issue facing the state of Texas? 18% said immigration, border security, 13%. Texas Pair is evidently reading the polls. But 11% say unemployment, 6% say jobs, 6% say healthcare. Governor Perry, 5%. Water supply, 3%, federal government, the president, 2%, and it goes down and down and down in percentages of what the important issues are. Several states, including Texas, considered instituting a new tax on full-calorie drinks. Only 27% support it, and Bloomberg did that in New York, and 68% oppose it. Among likely voters, support is 21% and 74% oppose it. Tell us whether you have a very favorable or somewhat favorable opinion. This is the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. 13% favored, somewhat favored 20%, 5% somewhat unfavorable, somewhat neither favorable nor unfavorable 5%, 13% somewhat unfavorable, very unfavorable 35%, don't know 14%. It's not bad. Among likely voters, I think this must have been among okay. Very favorable, somewhat 14%, and neither favorable 4%, and I'm guessing. Oh, okay. Anyway, what type of health insurance do you currently have? Employer provided, 44% there, individually paid for it, 12% very large, and enrolled in government health insurance. That's Medicare, Medicaid. 25% of those, fairly large there, do not currently have. 16%, very, very large, 4% refuse. How would do you drink full-calorie non-calorie soda? Very often 13%, somewhat 17%, not very often 32%. Well, that's good. Let's see. What do you think should happen to unaccompanied children there? 42% said they should be allowed to stay, 48% said they would return, and 10% didn't even know. Among likely voters, allowed to stay 36%, return 58%. Now that's the rural Texan vote coming in there. Please tell us whether or not you think it should be possible for a pregnant woman